first year center, and just a big fan of like educational psychology and learning. And I always say as part of my bio, I am a Ravenclaw because people seem to ask. So yeah, do you want to introduce yourself, Chietza?
Yes, so I'm Chiedza. I might also be another familiar voice. I've done a few of these workshops as well, and both Gretchen and I did some of the welcome day and
Yes.
prep for a prep week presentation. So I think both our voices might seem a little familiar right now. We both have our videos off right now because sometimes the connection acts a little bit funny when there's too much going on. So we will just stick to the presentation. And yeah, so today's workshop is on preparing for midterms. And some of you came in a little bit late, so we'll just do a bit of the housekeeping. You will find that you are muted right now because we just want to have a solid recording that we can put up online, but the chat is open and live and we will be checking it. So if we're going through this session and you do have questions, comments, pop them into the chat and then we can definitely address those as we go. But yeah, I hope you guys pick up a few things. It's going to be a wonderful workshop and thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes,
So,
thank you.
yeah, before we get started into the workshop, we are going to go into one of our favorite platforms called Menti. So we're going to put up on the screen right now. If you want to use your cell phones, you can absolutely do that. If you can go to www.menti.com and enter the code. Gretchen, I don't think it's coming up yet.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. And enter the code 326357, or you could use the QR code just to scan it right there and join us as we ask some of these wonderful questions that we have, because we want to get to know you and get to see who you are and get to know who you are as well. So, okay. So,
and again, there's the code if you need
so
a
yeah, we'll
QR
keep the
code.
code open there. You can also see it at the very top of the screen. It says go to www.menti.com and use the code 326357. And you can answer the first question there. What's one thing you need to know about midterms? So the fun thing about Menti is that as you answer, I think we can put this open, Gretchen, to allow us to view the, yeah, to share results. You can put in your response in there and we can get to know you guys and get to know some of what you guys think you need to know about midterms. So we'll wait for a few to respond.
Yeah, I don't see any results popping up yet. I wonder if it's just being a little bit slow. I'm going to test it out too on my phone.
Me too.
Okay. Maybe in the chat for in WebEx, if you wouldn't mind popping something in there to see, like, are you able to access Menti? Are you able to get to these questions? Just so we can make sure that it's working for everyone. Even just yes, no.
Okay, there we go.
Oh, there we go. We're starting now. We're getting to get some responses. Yeah.
All right, quite a few of you are popping your responses in there.
Nice. Okay, yeah. I like how one of the first ones that came out was when to start preparing. That's kind of nice that that's
Yes.
appropriate that it's the first one. Time. Yes, absolutely. How much time you have. That's especially a big thing when it comes to time zone differences.
Oh, I absolutely love this one. Is it open book or lockdown browser? This is a very good one because we've never
Really
gotten this
important.
response before because of obviously we've normally been on campus, but that's actually a very, very good question. You need to know if your test or midterm is going to be an open book or if you're going to be required to use a lockdown browser. The date and time are critical, yes.
And there's a lot here too about the format and the layout, definitely, which goes into that as well. One of the things that we're going to be talking about with preparing for midterms and study strategies in general is that really the way that you study, it should match the way that you're tested.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make sense, like if you're being tested on how to ride a bicycle, it doesn't make sense that you just read about bicycles. You actually have to get on the bike and start doing some practice. Oh, but this is like nice, yeah. And that sort of
Mm-hmm.
goes along with question styles. Okay, I see memorizing pop up, which is like an interesting note that we'll talk about memorizing and comprehension and sort of the best way to master a lot of content. Yeah. Mhm. Okay, nice. This is looking good. So, and I see that student is asking in the chat that they're on the phone. Yeah, you don't need to put in an answer if you're not able to right now. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Chiazza. So fast with the typing.
Trying. All
It's
right.
the time management one. That's
Time management is a really, really good one.
yeah.
And just on that, we actually talk a bit about time management, and we talked about it in our previous workshop. So we will pop the link into the chat shortly. But we actually talked about creating a study schedule, and time management is obviously a critical piece in studying, but it's also a critical piece in when you're taking the actual exam, right? Is your exam an hour? Is it 2 hours? And how do you manage your time to get your exam completed and done on time? Okay, let's try the next question.
Yeah, let's look at the next one. So what kind of midterms are you preparing for? So you have a couple options here. Multiple choice, essay exams, problem solving, lab exams, open book, and well, we have take home. And if you're maybe not sure, maybe that's a good indicator that you need to go to your syllabus, your course outline, your course information, and see what the format is like for your midterms.
No one's
Okay,
having an
lots of
essay exam? Okay, one person, good.
or maybe they're having take-home essays, right?
Oh,
That's
yes,
yeah,
yes,
that's
that
another
is
option
true.
as well.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of midterms I think that are in a mixed format,
Yeah,
but it's kind of nice to see which one's multiple choice and problem solving.
mm-hmm.
Those ones are really
Absolutely.
coming up. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's nice because strategies we're talking about today, they'll apply to that as well.
absolutely, absolutely will.
Mhm.
All right, thanks, you guys. Do we have another question?
Yeah, let's look at the next question. So, what's one thing you're concerned about when it comes to midterms? And you can put in more than one thing if there's more than one thing that you're worried about. I think there might be a little bit of overlap with that first question as well. Mm, not knowing the answers, yes. I think that fear of like blanking is
Mm-hmm.
sort of freezing on the test is really common. What's important to know? Yes, how to prioritize information that you're studying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And a lot of these seem to go together, not having enough time,
Yeah.
studying enough, not being
Mm-hmm.
prepared enough. Yeah. Not procrastinating. Oof. Yeah, that's a big, we have a whole other workshop on that
Yes,
as
we
well.
actually do. Yes, preventing procrastination. We would strongly recommend that one too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yes, it is already so soon. I think it's interesting for us because in a way it feels like the term has just started.
Mm-hmm.
But we are in February now, and there's already midterms around the corner, which is why we have this
Yes.
workshop now. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and refocusing when there are external distractions, definitely.
Yep.
Yeah, not knowing if they're prepared enough, focus on the right things to acknowledge, to practice, and solve a problem. Yeah, there's a lot of overlap
Yeah.
in these questions, I think.
I so seeing your responses, guys, you're absolutely in the right workshop. Your concerns hopefully will be addressed. Some of them might seem might overlap. Some of the information we'll give you might overlap, but you will find a lot of the information that we have to share with you very useful, hopefully, so, because we see a lot of your concerns here, and I think a lot of the topics that we will talk about will address those.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
so let's
Okay.
come back to this. So, yeah, do you want to walk us through our sort of agenda?
Yes. Okay. So um, today we're going to talk about these are like our six big, I guess, or critical tips that we're going to go through, just in the interest of thinking about all the different types of tests and midterms that you guys have indicated you're going to have, right? So we're going to have some tips on writing effective notes. We'll also talk about testing yourself, practice
Which
testing.
someone mentioned in the
Yes,
Menti. They
they
said how to
absolutely.
test yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Practice testing is very important, and we can show you how to do that and how to prepare very well for exams in that way. spreading out your studying so that you're basically distributing your studying, and we'll go into a bit more detail on that. We'll also talk about interleaving your studying and adding some variety into it, and using visual organizers and visual aids that will help you to recall information better. And obviously resources for asking questions. You know, a lot of you have mentioned some of the things that you're concerned about, and it's important to know who to ask for help, right? So we will talk a bit about asking for help and who to contact when you need assistance.
Yeah, that's perfect. And of course, like this PowerPoint in this session, they will be one of those resources that you can turn to and return to as you prepare for your midterms. Yeah, but we'll start with note taking. So this might be familiar or some review from academic prep week sessions, but I think it's kind of interesting revisiting this now that we've been in classes for a few weeks and you're getting a better idea of how much information and how complex that information is being conveyed in your lectures for your classes, or if not lectures, for your reading materials and course material. So some of the main strategies that we talk about when it comes to note taking are taking effective notes during lecture. We're going to have some examples of that. Condensing your notes right after class, or if you have maybe a class right after, condensing them within the same day. And reading actively and highlighting with care is what I always say. So not highlighting everything, because that isn't very useful, but sort of to go back to some responses on the Menti, trying to zero in on what is the important information. When talking about like condensing notes right after class too, like one of the ways that you can think about, you know, the daily and the weekly classes that you're attending is even just being in classes, that's a form of preparing for your midterms. I know that I have the experience of, you know, I'll take notes and in the moment I think, yes, these make so much sense. I'm never going to forget this. This is all great. And then by the time it comes to actually prepare for midterms, it's like, I don't remember any of this. This is such a hot mess. What was I thinking then? What do these scribbles mean? And that's where condensing your notes right when the information is fresh is actually can be seen as a form of like that's making a study guide for yourself, so that when you come back to it in the future, you have like a much more clear and complete form of that information that you're using to study from, maybe then rather than just your initial notes. So we'll look at an example of like some effective note-taking strategies. So this example is for like reading a text, but I think it can also apply to the information that you are reviewing for or previewing for a lecture. Basically to keep an eye out and mark important things like definitions and examples, because those are kind of bigger concepts that you know you're probably going to return to and that are going to be important. For myself, like just a very simple strategy is I like adding numbers to things because it helps me organize a big mass of information. If I can break it up into parts, have a clear order for it, and really highlighting the most important information. A really common question that we get is like, but how do you know what the important information is? Which is a very fair question. There are a couple things that go along with that. One is that if a paragraph is well written, the most important idea, the main idea of the paragraph, it'll be in the very first sentence. And then it should be, you know, again, cross fingers, if the paragraph's well written, the rest of the paragraph should expand and explain that. So like a good strategy is to like read the whole paragraph the whole way through, return to the beginning, and then see, okay, is that most important information like located in that beginning sentence, or is it buried a little bit farther down in the paragraph? So it does require like reading and returning to information. And another really good thing to look for too is repetition, right? If in this example, if we're talking about overlearning over and over again, then that's probably a good hint as well that that's maybe the main concept or the main idea. Asking questions is really important for where you don't understand, if you want to draw connections between maybe things that you've learned about like earlier in the course or other information that you already know. And that's where writing notes in the margins for yourself can be helpful as well. Basically, anything that can help to take new information that might be a little abstract or unknown to you, and that helps make it more personal, that connects it and builds on what you already know. That's going to help you with that process of one, understanding the information, and understanding the information is going to help you remember it better. We don't remember things that we don't understand. So we have to get that, we have to spend a lot of time in that comprehension, working with the information just to understand it, and then coming back to it over and over again throughout time in order to remember it, which is kind of something we're going to return to with some of these other strategies that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and Gretchen, can you tell us a bit about adding numbers? Because you said they're
Yeah.
numbering some of the points, right, as bullet points. Explain that a little bit for us, please.
So when you see like a big massive text like this, this is, I feel like I've read like lots of things like this, or really long like journal articles or text like things. Um, it's sometimes hard because it just feels like a big massive block, right? I'm thinking of like a massive block of tofu almost. It's like, I can't eat that. That's like way too much. But if I divide it up into smaller chunks and to smaller pieces, and so now I'm thinking of like almost like cubing or dicing that tofu and like organizing it, and putting it in numbers basically helps me see also like what is the order of these ideas? Like, is the sequence of how this information is being presented important? Most of the time it is, because your course materials, again, if they're written by good sources, they're prepared very thoughtfully by someone who is thinking of the best way to learn that is to take this information in this exact order, in this sequence. So I find for myself, like, even if I take a paragraph and try to see, okay, what are the three most important points in this and just number them off, that helps me somehow see like the organization, like the way that the information is put together. Once you can sort of tap into that, it makes actually understanding the information a lot easier. And the other way around, which is where we're going to talk with visual organizers.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, or is that a little too abstract?
Oh yeah, that makes sense to me. I think what
Yeah.
we're essentially saying is that when you get a whole block of text that looks something like what's on the right hand side there, it's great for you to summarize it to the critical information, right? Because when you are studying in preparation for a midterm or an exam, you don't want to have to read that whole block again, right? You just want
Mm-hmm.
to know the four main points that are coming from that whole page. So in this case, even though there's a whole block of text on the right, on the left, we know that that whole block is just talking about four main points: overlearning,
Yeah.
creating meaning, minimize interference,
Mm-hmm.
and take breaks. That's really all that's coming out of that page. So you're trying to make things easier for yourself when you come back again in preparation for a midterm. And so this is how you should be condensing your notes after class, or when you are sort of trying to, read ahead of your class as well. Try to focus on the main points so that when you're preparing for a midterm, whether it's the day before or the actual day that you're just doing a quick revision, you know what those main points are.
Okay, thank you. That is a much clearer explanation.
I hope that makes sense. Please feel free to put that in the chat if it doesn't make sense. But we'll move on to
Yeah.
the next um, tip and idea, which is practice testing, right? And so over and over again in the research, practice testing, which is also known as retrieval practice, is shown to be the most effective of any study technique that you can use. So practice testing is more effective than rewriting and rereading notes because it's more active and it's a very like active form of learning. You actually have to practice getting the information from your memory. Practice
Hence
testing.
retrieval practice,
Yes.
practicing retrieving. Yeah.
Yeah. So practice testing helps to clarify what you know and what you don't know. It gives you a more objective idea of what you need to focus on. Practice testing actually helps you learn and remember material. So profs don't give you tests just to evaluate you. They want to see how you're doing, right? And practice testing sort of
Mhm.
helps you figure out, in the same way that your prof would also test you. And being tested on things makes you remember those things a lot better. It's actually, like, again, the most effective way to learn, but not always the most comfortable, right? Sometimes
Yes.
we practice testing, we tend to make the questions easy on ourselves, right? But there's definitely ways to test yourself that is going to be challenging enough and close enough to what your prof was going to show you. So we've got some examples over here of different ways to practice test. So sometimes you can actually ask your profs or look up old tests and exams so that you can use those to gauge how how much you know and how much you don't know. Your textbooks almost always have problem solving questions at the back of chapters or sometimes at the very end of the whole textbook. Um, if you are in a course that requires a lot of writing, you could also practice that, right? Practice actually writing with a timer, right? If you know that your exam is probably only going to give you 25 minutes per question, practice writing a short essay or a short paragraph in that time, right? You want to practice and get into those habits. Quiz yourselves with your friends. Maybe you want to exchange notes. As you may have noticed by now, in Learn, you actually have access to all of your classmates' contact information in terms of their U of M email. You could form groups and exchange notes and exchange quizzes and tests that you've come up with. So that's a good way to also test yourself. Use flashcards, right? Because that's, again, that retrieval. You're trying to retrieve from your memory before you flip that card to find out what the answer is. And these are all basically techniques that you can use to help yourself and to test yourself to see how much you know and how much you don't know, right?
Can I like circle back to something that you
Sure.
said, Tieta, which I just like I love is that profs aren't testing you just to evaluate your knowledge
Mhm.
or because they're mean and they drink student tears. That's not either. But it's really interesting and something that I don't think we're always aware of is that when you are tested on something, you remember it a lot better. I know it doesn't often feel that way because usually like a lot of times we cram, we study a lot before the test, we do the test, and then afterwards our brains feel very empty and we just like want to forget everything and the whole experience. But then when like and again this is like through like a lot of studies, a lot of research has like sort of marked this really interesting effect. It's actually called the testing effect. um, that yeah, when they come back to students who have been like quizzed constantly, let's say throughout a course, the students that had that constant testing, they remember the information so much better rather than students who maybe just like read the material or rewrote their notes. It's something about that actual being in that actual situation of going through a test, whether it's one that your prof sets for you or whether it's one that you've set for yourself, that actually makes you able to remember the information better. I think it's nice too when you test yourself because it's lower stakes, right? It's not as nerve wracking. It's not. It doesn't make you as anxious, so that by the time you actually do a test that is for marks, you're familiar with what it's like to be in that attested timed situation that you've had control over. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's try an exercise. Let's try, and you guys can use the
Yes.
chat. Let's try to figure out what. So this is a very good example. Which question is more likely to show up on your test or on an exam, right? And why? And so you can pop in the chat which one you think is more likely to show up in an exam, either question one or question two. So question one reads, "What is the definition of population?" Question two reads, "What are some of the similarities and differences between population and density?" And you can let us know in the chat what you think, and even why.
Two to
If you want to
two.
type out like why you think it's number two, feel put in two, because we would like to know why you think that.
Yeah, because I think yeah, if anyone's willing to sort of expand on that in the chat, I think it's sort of a lot of people say, oh yeah, two is the better one, but why is it the better one? So okay, so I'm saying two due to it's showcasing more of the course material, and that you understand it exactly. It's asking you to demonstrate more knowledge, right? Um, yeah, and it's and saying to test your knowledge, not just common sense, right?
Yes.
And these are like purposely easy questions, like just for example. But and okay, and we're also saying it's more complex. It's thing is contrasting to two and demonstrating deeper knowledge.
That's a
Exactly.
great answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Mhm.
Okay. What's the, can you reveal the answer, Gretchen?
Yeah, I mean, not. I don't think it's a surprise. Yeah. Number two, but I really like these last few comments too in the chat about
Mhm,
questions like come more twisted to assess your course knowledge,
mhm,
and if you can answer the question, it shows your understanding of the content. Exactly, right? That's a very common, I guess, definition of sort of like testing is what you want to demonstrate your mastery or understanding of the content.
mhm.
Questions are often asked in a more complex way instead of just what's the definition, because that's easy, right?
Yeah.
That's just a straight up, oh, I memorized this definition and I'm regurgitating it. There's not that much critical thinking that's there.
Yes.
When you're now having to think about, okay, what is the contrast? What are the difference between these two ideas or concepts? That's getting a little bit deeper. So let's
Mhm.
look at that next one. So,
Sorry, just to go back to that other
okay,
question. It's not, we're not saying that a question like um, that question one would never come up in an exam. It could come
yeah.
up, right? But
I think
what
more in like a high school test,
yes,
maybe.
but what would
Like,
happen if maybe you've studied the population definition of population only, but you haven't studied the definition of density, right? And that question comes up as what is the definition of density? If you have been practicing using question two, which makes you think about similarities and differences between population and density. Whichever question comes up of a definition, you can actually define population and you can actually define density. So when you are creating your practice questions, try to think about this, right? Where you are thinking about, like you guys mentioned, the contrasts, the differences, the similarities between two similar ideas, but also being able to explain each one individually too is going to be important. So you don't know which one's going to come up, but it's great to know both in this case, right?
mhm.
Yeah.
Hmm. And it's thinking at a couple of different levels,
Yes.
right? Like just individual definitions, like doing that analysis and comparison. And I think something that the comments in the chat are getting at too
Mhm.
is like sort of thinking from the point of view of your professor, right? Like
Yeah,
which question is the one that's going to show me that the student really understands this content in a
absolutely.
deeper way. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, next one.
Okay, which question is more likely to show up on a test or exam? And again, and why? So one and two. So the first one is we have seasons because of A, the distance between the Earth and the Sun, B, the tilt of the Earth's axis, C, the rotation of the Earth, D, a combination of A and B, and E, a combination of B and C. So that's the first one. And for the second one, we have seasons because of A, the distance between the Earth and the Sun, B, the movement of the tides, C, the tilt of the Earth's axis, D, Pluto no longer being a planet, and E, we polluted Mother Nature and she hates us. So again, same thing. If you want to say one or two, which one is better, and again that and why.
Mhm. Okay, anybody want to give it a go? Okay, so two people have said one because of the formality.
Formality.
Yeah. Mhm.
Anyone else want to guess? We'll give it maybe another minute.
Okay. Well, we can talk about it. One is the better question. You're totally right. And these are all things that we talk about when we discuss the movement of the earth, right? This is testing how well you know that's like the smaller differences in the concepts. So it's good to create if you're struggling with differences between different terms, right? Like for instance, in this case, rotation and axis, right? It will force you to distinguish between the two. But you might prefer the second question. Like we said, sometimes when we create our own test questions, we make it easy for ourselves, right? Uh, I like the very last point there where it says we've polluted Mother Nature and she hates us. And like realistically, is this kind of question going to come up in an exam? Probably not. But question one really helps you think about the different concepts that are being mentioned there and what how they are in combination with each other, and again comparing them to each other as well. So question one definitely is more likely to come up in a test or an exam.
Hmm. And I think like to sort of like address the comments in the chat, yeah, because you have to understand all the answers to
Mm-hmm.
pick the right one, right? That you need to know how each of those things distinctly are different. Because as Chance was saying, they all seem like sort of related. But in the second one, there are a lot of obvious what we call confounders, like clearly wrong answers
Mm-hmm.
that are so distinctly different from each other. So instead of these big differences between ideas, you're where it's easy to eliminate wrong answers. You're getting, as Shaz is saying, these small differences between related ideas, and you're also having to do some thinking with that combination, right? Um, it's
Yeah.
yeah. Again, it's like an easy question, but it's meant to be that way. Just as an example, when you're doing your own, make them make them to your difficulty level and suit your content.
Yeah.
And we'll take a look at sort of this
We have
last
one more. Yeah.
example. Yeah, and I think like, oh, yeah, this is kind of an interesting one, but which question? And these are meant to sort of be like flashcards. Like flashcard one is front and back, and flashcard two is that front and back. Which one do you think is more likely to show up on a test or exam? And again, and why? Mm.
Anyone care to
Venture, I
share?
guess. Yeah.
Is it flashcard number one or flashcard number two? Okay, so somebody says two, somebody else says one. Number the flashcard number two because it has more details. Two because it covers and connects more information. Okay, yeah. I think two. This test question identifies more detail versus one. Okay,
Mm. And
because it
because it
requires
requires you
you
to distinguish
between
between
terms.
terms.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Mm. Gretchen explains this one really well. Gretchen, explain to us, please. What's
Yeah, I think,
which
well,
one's the correct answer?
because it's one of those cheesy things that it's kind of both. It kind of depends, right? So as we've had the comments in the chat, both because they're asking different questions. They are asking you to do different tasks.
Yeah.
And I think another way to think of this too as like, which one would you prefer to have like as a flashcard or as a study guide? So on one hand, that first one, it's getting at a very specific focused idea, like just on this concept of the mesosphere, and it's really drilling down to detail. This second one is again taking that bigger picture, bigger context, asking you to, okay, like you also have to know those small specific ideas like the mesosphere, but then you need to do that contrast and comparison. So I think you kind of need both of those things. You need the small specific detail, and you need that bigger picture at the same time. So I think again, I think maybe what is the mesosphere might be again too simple and straightforward of a definition to just be on a test or exam. But I don't know. I don't want to like rule it out completely as something that might show up if that's the amount of detail that is being asked for. But you also have to have that bigger picture as
Yeah, and
well.
just I think the important point that I think you've said just to stress here is which flashcard would you rather study with, right? If you
Mm,
had flashcard number two, you would still be able to answer the question in card number one, right?
yeah.
But if you had card number one only, And question number two came up, just how much of that can you actually get down, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the
You might
point
know
here is,
one very specifically, but
yes. So the point here is when you are using practice testing, try not to make it too easy for yourself, right? Because you don't know what's going to come up in the exam. But try to know at least as much as you can based on what was emphasized, obviously, by your course instructor, as well as in your textbooks and the course material that you would have received.
Mhm. I think that's, I mean, another question that kind of comes up when we talk about this is like, but how will I know like how difficult to make the questions? And so it's kind of, uh, again, that's as Chaz is saying, like looking at your course material, like looking to your professor for cues, looking at the way that questions are asked in your course and any other quizzes or assignments you've had. What is the difficulty? What is the depth of detail? How are questions asked? You're looking at all those things for to sort of gauge, like to get a good idea what will be the level of difficulty on the midterm. I think like I had, a lot of experiences of getting to the midterm being like, I studied, I'm so prepared, especially in physics, and then being like, oh, I've never been asked this question before. This is a trick. And having to eventually get over that and be like, oh, it's just that I haven't been studying to the right depth. It's not a trick. I just wasn't studying at the right like difficulty level. So again, I was saying the way I was asking questions to myself were like too easy or too familiar. And that what I should have expected was that this is going to test your knowledge maybe in a different way. This is going to require you to do some more critical thinking and problem solving to push yourself more than you did when you were originally studying. So again, that we want to make our studying match up to how we're going to be tested. I would say it's always rough with the first round of midterms.
Mhm.
That's
But that's why you're in this workshop, right? That's why you're
yeah.
in here, so we can prepare for that. So just to sum it up, okay, so practice questions should be complex and difficult, as the questions that you're probably going to get from your test. Focus on the small differences. Um, so I think this is a really good way to, if you just think about the questions that we were just going through just now, right? A lot of them will look at the small differences between different concepts. Force yourself to recall and retrieve the information, right? Rather than just
Yeah.
giving yourself information, try to actually retrieve it um, from your memory.
hmm
Mhm.
And so a really good question just came up about how making test questions and note taking can be very time sensitive. How much time would you put towards making a question versus testing and answering? I think a really good way to do it is like to take advantage of you if you can of some of those resources that already exist. If questions already exist, to pull in those. But kind of like with the principle of like note taking every day, like can you be making test questions like on a regular basis as you're learning material? Because that will also help you learn and understand things. So instead of having a big chunk of time near the end where now you have to turn all your material into test questions, again, if you can do a little bit of that, like the whole way,
Yeah.
that will help save time. And actually,
That is
that's
a
gonna
very good question. I think
good
that's a very good
segue.
question. Yeah,
Good
sorry.
transition.
I was thinking the same thing. Good. Go back to the paragraph that we had that was highlighted, and the 4 points that we made on the left-hand side, right? So essentially, if you're studying, right, you can easily come up with a question right there, right? What are 4 study strategies? And already there's 4 bullet points. So you've already given yourself a potential question right there, right? So you can actually come up with these questions as you study for sure.
Yeah, none of these strategies are really meant to be done independently of each other. They're all sort of meant to work together, to be layered together. Yeah.
Okay, let's go back.
Let's talk about spreading out your studying some more. So, I don't think this is going to be surprising to anyone. This matches up, I think, with how logically we think about how we know studying should work. Distributed practice for spreading out your studying and spaced repetition are more effective than cramming. So by distributed practice, like the way that I like to think of it is simply is just like doing a little bit every day and just letting those cumulative effects build up. So we can think of this in contrast to cramming, which like I think everybody is familiar with because we're all human, or maybe you have a test coming up, you spend the next like 1 or 2 days, like maybe pull an all-nighter, like trying to meet a deadline to study for it. And if, especially if you have like a couple of tests, maybe you finish one and you have to swing right into the next one, and you just kind of repeat that pattern. That's very, very human. We all kind of do it. We're all pressure prompted is kind of the nice phrase for it. Is the short of saying we all procrastinate. But it's not the only way that you have to study. There is also this other method of spreading out your study or distributed practice. So the idea is like instead of having these huge chunks, like let's say in this case where you're just focusing on Arts 1110, that you give yourself kind of a longer lead up and that you have shorter sessions that you're just repeating and that you're spacing out throughout that time. And this is the way that I approach projects now, and it's definitely saved my life, like saved my sleep, made things so much less stressful. Instead of saying, okay, I have this deadline coming up, so the 2 days I have to block off everything just to finish that, to say, okay, I've like 2 weeks now. How can I do this for half an hour for these 2 weeks? And it just this is really actually more how we learn. When you do this, when you cram, again, that's that case where afterwards you're not going to remember a lot
No,
of
what
what
I
you've
like about
learned.
this image is
No.
you look at biology 1020. Now you're just spending what, like
Oof.
less than half a day
Yeah,
on
to
a
just
big
put out that
exam or
report.
lab report, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like the days before, so Sunday and Saturday, you had like a huge chunk for what was that, stats, right? So
Yeah.
how do you even decide which course is getting more time than the other? And is really like half a day enough for a biology lab report? Maybe you actually need more time with it, right? So I think this also answers the question. I think somebody was like, I'm worried about time management, right? So
Yeah.
time management in your study sessions is also very, very critical. And cramming might not
Mm.
necessarily work at this level of study. Maybe it worked in high school, but
Yeah.
not in university.
I think that's the a very big rude awakening that we talk about almost every term with every new batch of students that come in, is that they say this worked in high school, it does not work now with the amount of material that I have.
Yeah.
Um, and part of that is, yeah, because there is so much more material. And think about in high school, you're getting a lot of tests, a lot of assignments. So if you mess up one or two, it's like it's okay because you can make it up with other assignments. One of the big differences in university is you have a lot fewer assignments that are worth a lot more. And so the stakes are higher. And if you can just like spread out that time when you're working on things, what it also helps you do when it comes to time management, which was, I'm surprised that this actually didn't come up earlier when people were talking about what they were concerned about, but a question that we get very often is how do you study for multiple midterms or tests at the same time? How do you figure out what to prioritize? And what this strategy does of spreading out your studying, like, focusing on different subjects like a little bit every day, is that you get to hit all of your courses. You get to spend some time and pay attention to all of them.
Yeah. There's a question in the chat, Gretchen. How would you recommend integrating this if you are starting closer to the due dates and are backed up on
Yeah,
material?
yeah. Great question, great question. So, really, if you're starting close to the due date and you're backed up with material, what you should be doing, along with the stuff that you're learning right now currently in classes, you should be going back to the earliest things that you learned and to the stuff that's kind of in the middle as well. Like the stuff that's the most recent, you probably don't have to spend as much time. Prioritizing that because it's fresher, it's more recent in your memory. It's easier for you to retrieve when it comes to a test and exam. But guaranteed, the stuff from the beginning, earlier to the start of term and in the middle, that's the stuff that's definitely faded if you haven't made the effort to like deliberately come back to it at some point in between. So what you might find is that you actually have to reteach yourself material that you learned before. So this is what you can do with spreading out your studying as well, is that if you can mix in some old material along with new material, those will help build up on each other as well. Yeah.
So what basically with the tips that we are introducing you guys to, these are things that are good habits to cultivate, right? So
Yeah.
some of you might be in your very first year of university. Some of you might just be maybe just starting into going into your second year, right? And so you're trying to figure out what works best for you. Maybe you're doing something right now that hasn't been working well for you. It's okay to pivot. It's okay to change, and to figure out what works for you, right? So I know somebody's put in there, would I be able to adjust this to my new timetable? Absolutely, right? It's just a matter of actually sitting down and drawing up your timetable. And we talk about this in our previous workshop. I think I included the link in the chat.
Hmm.
If you log in and watch that workshop, we talk about creating an effective study schedule. So you can actually go in and maybe try to use some of those concepts if you feel like, oh, how do I now get this distributed practice working now? There's ways to do that, but you have to first of all try to think about how you're planning your term, how you're planning your month, how you're planning your week, and then how you're planning an actual study session, right? You need to break it down into smaller segments. So if you can, please refer back to our previous workshop where we talk about that.
Hmm. And we'll sort of zero in on the academic success workshop to website at the end, so you
Mm-hmm.
can also see like previous versions of when we talked about these things as well. But if you know for yourself that studying for a few hours at a time works for you, then go with that and build on that, and then try to introduce some of the principles though
Yeah,
that we're talking about, like when you have a natural break point, can you switch now to actually can we talk about interleaving now? Can we I
absolutely.
think this is sort of where this conversation is
Segues well.
going.
Yeah, so our fourth tip on preparing for midterms is what we call interleaving. And so interleaving is studying multiple subjects or multiple problems in the same study session or a study block, right? So most of us are used to, just like Gretchen mentioned, like cramming. And people tend to think that they learn better when they study just one subject all
Oh,
throughout.
it's a lie. It's a lie.
Again,
Sorry,
it
the science
feels
bears this
good.
out, but
It feels good to get those short-term gains. But when you actually want to master material, it's actually great for you to actually do it short amounts of time, right? So one example we absolutely love to show, and we have this in the next slide, is imagine you're at the gym and you're working out, right? And you are trying to get in shape. Maybe you're trying to lose weight, maybe you're trying to get abs. I don't know what your goal is, right? But would you get abs quicker if you just did one whole hour of sit ups? Or would you probably get in shape by doing a bunch of different things, right? Most people who work out will tell you that you will need to do a few different routines, exercises in that 1 hour block to get the results you're looking for. So it's the same thing with studying, right? You are looking for a way to retain information, to be able to retrieve that, right? But if you just do one long 3 hour session, trust me, by the time that you get to hour number two, even, you probably won't even remember a lot of the stuff that you read in the first hour. So this is what we're trying to
yes.
help you think about, is how are you actually using that time, um, where you're maybe mixing a bit of what you've read before, and it's actually better for your long-term learning. It's better for your energy. It's better for your retention if you spend shorter chunks
Mm.
of time on shorter subjects and you interleave your studying. By interleaving, we just mean like you again studying multiple subjects or um, different kinds of problems in one study session. Basically, you're adding variety, and this is very similar to how your exams are going to be anyway, right? If you
Yeah.
think about the different topics that you've learned so far in your courses, you've probably had, let's just say, we're in February now, so about a month into the term, you've maybe had like 4 different topics. If a midterm was going to come, those topics are going to be mixed in there, no specific order, right? So if you are practicing your studying in that way, your mind is also able to retrieve information in that way. So if you're looking for ways to prepare for your midterm, then practice even in preparing for those midterms to mix your information so that you're able to do multiple subjects and multiple problems. So this is a very good example, right? With this Math 1300 course, where there's 4 different topics in that you're able to study in one study session, instead of just doing one big block of the same um, subject, of the same topic, of the same kind of problem, and maybe running into some issues with that, right? If you're thinking about, then how do I actually break down into a session? Like, how do I break down each session, like a study session, to figure out what topics to study? Can we go to the next slide, Gretchen? I think
Yeah.
it actually shows
Oh,
us. Oh,
you
yeah,
want to
this
look at
one.
this one?
Sorry,
Yeah.
really well. So this is somebody's study session for Monday, April 17th, 2019. So it was a while ago, but you can see from morning through to the end of the day exactly how many topics and how many courses they're actually going through, right? So this person in one day is actually able to study for 3 different courses and has allocated specific times for each of the topics in that class. So either the 5-minute sessions, 15-minute sessions, they even put in their break in there as well, right? And then go someplace else or take a break and then come back and allocate time for another topic, another subject, another course, right? So in a day, you've actually taken quite a few strides in 3 different courses, and you're actually able to retrieve things a lot better because of this technique.
Mm-hmm. And something that I want to say to sort of address the question that's sort of come up in the chat, that what if it takes like a long time to get into that focus mode in a session, then you realize that you're done and that you need to take a break. So it can be difficult to study multiple subjects in a day. This is where, I mean, it's in another workshop, but we chat a lot about what's called the Pomodoro technique.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's like tons of timers online for this, where you set a timer for 25 minutes, you work for that focused amount of time, and then you take a 5-minute break. So that's the way that this schedule is set up as well. Even though it looks like a lot, if you look at the timestamps, you'll see they're actually really short chunks of time, because and honestly, there's some variation with this, but most of us have short attention spans. I know. Oh yes, I'm saying, what a world where a Starbucks break is only 5 minutes. Yeah, that's like 1/3 of your time in the Starbucks line if you're at the Starbucks on campus. But uh, for a lot of us, we have shorter attention spans where it is hard for us to sustain, as Shaz was saying, energy and focus and motivation over a long amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
So this kind of model where you are switching maybe subjects or switching, different topics within one course, it's really meant to work with that, with those ebbs and flows in your attention and energy. When you notice you're wandering, when you notice you're stuck, that's usually a good signal that you need to go take a break, but then come back maybe and try to do something else. So the way that I like to structure things as well to make it a bit easier is to just start with the hardest thing first. Because that's when I'm freshest in a session. That's where I'll need the most brain energy. And then when I'm coming back, maybe when I'm doing another Pomodoro, another session, I know that it's going to be something easier that I can work on. And it doesn't even have to be 25 minutes. If it's something you really hate, just do it for 15 minutes, do it for 10 minutes, do it for 5 minutes, whatever it takes for you to actually get started. And this ties in a lot to time management and procrastination as well. Just using those short repeated sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And
Sorry,
one thing I
that's a
think,
whole
yeah,
segue, but
Gretchen, yeah, that's okay. But I think Gretchen always likes to emphasize that, like, it's, yes, sometimes there are some topics we don't necessarily enjoy studying, or some courses that we absolutely don't enjoy studying, but then we have to take that class, right? But if you plan your day to just only spend 5 minutes on that one topic, right? 5 minutes is not really hard to concentrate. Remember that you also want to set up your desk or whatever you are at home, right? To just be, to have no distractions, right? So if
Mhm.
you are distraction free and you've got 5 minutes to focus on one topic, that is totally doable, right? But if you decide that you have maybe your phone with you, you have music playing, your cat is there, and then there's a coffee, and then you know what? Yes, then there's no point in even doing this, right? You also have to put in the effort of being disciplined and being a professional student as well, and putting in that time where you have no distractions.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, easier said than done, but yes,
True.
absolutely. That could sort of be a whole other session on just
Yeah.
how to be professional as a student. And since I'm saying a break for 5 minutes, yeah, I mean, like you can again, that's just the way that the Pomodoro sets it up. But there
Mhm.
are other models too where maybe you work for 45 minutes and then you take a 15-minute break. It's sort of one of those things you kind of have to test out on your own and do some experimenting and see, which workflow really works for you. The danger with having a break more than 5 minutes is that you just kind of wander off and start, playing with the cat or
Yeah.
and not coming back to the study. So I think that's why the short break.
Mhm.
Um, we have a few minutes left, so shall we sort of do speed round, like going
Okay.
through
Yes.
some of the rest of this? So,
Yeah.
so along with interleaving, like and these other strategies, one of the things that I really like to use, which you can sort of see throughout this presentation, is organizing information visually. Because the way that I like to think of visual organizers is they help us connect different pieces of information into a meaningful whole. When something is meaningful, that makes it easier for us to understand the information and to remember it. So, for example, if I just gave you this whole list of vocabulary words, yeah, you could probably memorize it with enough time and do okay. But if you put it into a format like this, where suddenly there is a relationship, there's a hierarchy, you see how things are related to each other, then in that case, like this makes it so much easier to understand this concept. And I know that I would much rather study with a visual guide like that, which makes all these sort of, again, abstract terms much more meaningful to me, rather than just a random list of vocabulary. So there are tons of examples for visual organizers. One of the things that I like to do, because like I have to read a lot of text, a lot of complex information, is to take a bunch of words like this and try to figure out what is the simplest way that I could represent this visually to show the relationship between these pieces of info. So this is sort of what I came up with. So basically, this is saying the same thing as all of these words, right? For prereqs, take stat 1000, you can take stat 2000. If you want to take stat 2150 in the future, you can, do that in whichever order you like. Um, and I think to me, just looking at this, using this as a reference, that's a lot easier to study from rather than having to go back, reread, make sense out of all of these words and sort of these if-then cases. So your visual organizers, they don't always need to be like beautiful or complex or like Pinterest worthy. They can just be very brief and very functional. And something like this, you're taking a lot of complex info, you're putting it in a very clear and simple form. And just the act of doing that, of wrestling with this information and figuring out how to organize it visually, that is helping you understand and work with the information as well. That is also increasing your comprehension of the information. Um, Other things you can do as well, like you could use PowerPoint, you could use Microsoft Word, lots of visuals that you can use there, again, to think about relationships between ideas. Chiedza just put into the chat a handout from the ALC, which has even more examples of graphic or visual organizers. One that I particularly like, which I heard about like from a student, is like, this is absolutely brilliant, was to start using spreadsheets for a lot of complex information where you have a lot of terminology, especially in courses like anatomy, physiology, biology. What's nice about having a spreadsheet is that like we're seeing this information one way, right? Where okay, it's cell division is what's determining how we're reading the rest of this information, but you could just as easily decide to sort your information by one of these other categories. That lets you see the same information related to each other in different ways, in complex ways. And I think that's really getting at the way that you could be tested on a midterm or on an exam. The same information that you're already familiar with, but sort of put into a new context and seen in a new relationship. So and again, just the act of creating a guide like this going to force you to think about that information and how it connects to each other. Information's like sticky. It likes to connect to other information, and visual organizers do a really good job of helping connect a lot of different things. And so say,
And
I wish profs would do this for us. I wish I had done this like
yeah, I wish I
back in
knew
my
this when I was a
day.
student too. And I think what's interesting about this is that sometimes, like, you're thinking, oh, now I have to go back and like do all this stuff, right? That's not necessarily what we're saying, but what we're thinking is like when you are studying, right, you want to start maybe cultivating again this habit of how are you actually putting down your information so that it's easier for you in the future, right? Because right now, yes,
Mm-hmm.
you're preparing for midterms, but you're also going to have finals at the end of the term, right? You want
Yes.
to make things easier for your future self. So you can definitely start um, cultivating the habit of creating different ways of understanding what you've learned. And we're not saying use every single technique that we've talked about today, but you can maybe pick up on one and just start with that, or maybe you can use
Mm-hmm.
two or three that you can relate to. Whatever it is, we're just giving you a bunch of ideas on how to try out stuff.
Hmm. And the interesting thing too is like I love that point that yeah, it's not just about midterms, it's really about finals, which is even far, it feels far away, but it's not really. Um, a lot of the strategies we're talking about, they are effortful. They require effort, they require deliberation and intention and energy, which is why they're not the ones that we automatically use. Because I don't know, humans and our brains, we like to be very, let's say, energy efficient instead of lazy. We like shortcuts to things. We like the least effort because our bodies want to preserve energy. But the least effort is not going to lead to the most learning.
Mhm.
So it does require some investment upfront, especially when you are maybe trying to make or incorporate one of these strategies as a new habit. It's at the beginning that it's going to take the most effort. But then the more and more you use it, the easier and more automatic it becomes. And the results are absolutely worth it. We don't pick these strategies out of hat. I do like a ton of reading to see sort of what the current research is saying about what the most effective study strategies are. We would not include these ones here if there wasn't really strong evidence to show that this is what helps students be successful, which is why these are the ones that we've picked and prioritized to really talk about. Um, so where can we access the recordings? So those will be in a couple of different places. They'll be on the Academic Learning Center website
We can talk
in a
about that
little
towards the
bit.
end. I think we'll
Yeah.
address that, but for now, we'll just finish off with the
Oh
last
yeah.
tip that we have.
Let's
Um,
talk about this
yeah.
because this is really important.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tip
Yeah.
number six, and this is the last one. I know we're out of time, but what we'll do is we'll actually address this one through Menti. So if you want to go back on your phones, go to menti.com, and we will answer some of the well, I think it's only just one question that we have in this one.
Yeah. It's
Question.
this one question. When you
Yeah.
get that's great. Some people have already put in answers. When you get stuck,
Perfect.
where do you go for help?
Mhm. Okay.
Academic advisors, nice.
Yeah, we're a little bit biased. If you say you're going to be an academic advisor, we're like all smiles. But yes, some people have indicated that they go to their profs and their TAs. That's an
Awesome.
excellent resource to use. If you think about it, like who's writing up the exam that you're going to write, right? Who's teaching
Mhm.
you all this information? It's going to be your prof and your TA. So they know what you need to know in preparation for the midterm or for the final exam. They know the right answers and the wrong answers. So if you're stuck, if you're unsure of something, they should be your first point of contact when it comes to course material and the stuff that you're actually learning in class. Also remember that your profs and some of your TAs actually have office hours as well. So it's part
Mhm.
of their commitment to you. They have to make time to meet with you and address your questions and explain things to you if you need that. So please do talk to your profs.
It's
Um,
part of what you're paying for. It's
yes,
your tuition. You're paying for office hours.
you are paying for office hours. Tutors and SI leaders. I think Gretchen would be fantastic at talking about this one.
Yeah, so you found like this workshop probably through the Academic Learning Center. So along with workshops like this, they do like one-on-one tutoring for study skills for writing. There are group study sessions like supplemental instruction, handouts like the one she had just shared the link with. There's a virtual study hall, so this is another way, a great way to battle procrastination if you're having trouble getting started on your own. It's much easier when you're studying with like-minded individuals. And I'm not sure, yeah, you might be familiar with this, but if we go to the Academic Learning Center website as well, they have their link for how you can book an online one-on-one appointment with a study skills or writing tutor. This service is free to you if you're a U of M student, or rather, it's part of the student fees that you've paid. So, like, take advantage of this service you've already paid for. If you'd like to talk with a study skills tutor about, like, maybe creating a study schedule to prepare for midterms, or what is the best way to practice problem solving for your specific course, you can go to this content and study skills tutor schedule, and I'll just log in real quick. What's nice too is you can sort of limit it by a specific class. So let's say I want help with Chem 1300 specifically, then I could see which tutors have experience in tutoring in that area. To make an appointment, you just click on any of these like empty white boxes. You can put in here in the box like, what are you concerned about? What's the course that you're studying for? And just fill out that information. The more information that you put in here about that, tell us about your primary concern. What do you want to talk about with a tutor? The more helpful the session can be right from the beginning, because the tutors do read these like before they meet with you. They'll do some prep beforehand. They'll have a better idea of how to sort of dive in and make the best use of your time and their time. And yeah, and it is a free service. Um, close that real quick. But one thing that we'll sort of do just really quickly as well is, we'll have this is the summary of the strategies that we talked about: note taking, testing yourself, spreading out your studying, interleaving your studying by adding variety, using visual organizers, and definitely reaching out and asking for help. But one really important sort of thing that we want to cover too is that, what if things go wonky or wrong in the middle of an online midterm? If you know you have unstable internet, like maybe make some plans to write in some place with secure Wi-Fi. Make sure that you have your instructor's contact info handy. One thing that I've suggested to students, if you have a feeling that your tech is going to go wrong, even draft like a short email beforehand so that it's ready to just hit send to your professor if something goes wrong in the middle. Be proactive, as in like, run through some, well, what if scenarios. What if this happens? Then what should I do? Make sure you read the information that your professor provides about that and who to contact. Um, if you end up needing to contact someone, whether it's, your professor or maybe IST, one thing that's really helpful to do is take screenshots of whatever is happening on your computer, hit save often, and be as detailed as you can if anything goes wrong with your on the technical side. If, worst comes to worst, you like miss a midterm or you get booted out in the middle or something like that, the best person to talk to is your professor. They're the ones who can make accommodations if you need to, if you need to make up the midterm in some way, or to connect you with IST. So making sure you're in contact with your professor is really like one of the best ways to sort of give yourself a little bit of protection and ease of mind going into a midterm. Yeah.
Sorry, just
Um,
before we round off, can we go back to Menti? Because there's this one
sure.
that I think we need to address. Um, just because there are some students have indicated that they do talk to their friends and classmates and family as well, right?
Hmm.
which is great. Sometimes maybe your friends or your family have taken similar courses or the same courses, right? But it is important to understand too that just because somebody is taking maybe it's even a different course, right? The rules in that course might be completely different. Maybe you're stuck on a topic that is addressed completely differently in another section or by another professor. So yes, friends and family are good, but they don't always know everything, right? So maybe you've got questions about like admission requirements or whatever it is. Try to connect with an academic advisor because we know a lot about that stuff and it's the official information from the university. But your friend or your family, they mean well, but might not necessarily have the most recent and up-to-date information that you need to be successful in whatever it is that you're stuck on. So
Especially in an online environment when so much is changing all the time, right? Like, as Shaz is saying, this is our job to, like be current with the stuff, get information when you need it. Maybe if your cousin took the course before, maybe it was 5 years ago when it was completely different. So
yeah.
maybe it's actually not helpful for right now.
Mhm.
But yeah, you can definitely connect with us. If you're in your first year, you can contact the first year center, or you can connect with an advisor in your home faculty if you're not in University One. But this is, what we're here for, to
And
talk
we
about the
love,
stuff
love,
as
love,
well.
love, love to meet with students. I see
Yes.
people are feeling difficult to ask for help. I totally understand that, but I also want you to understand that this is something that you're already paying for. You're already paying for all of these resources, so you do make an effort to ask questions and ask the appropriate people, and understand that we're also always very happy to meet with you. We love meeting with students and helping you out with whatever issues that you're stuck on. So please do try to contact an advisor or your professors or any of the resources that we have here, like your tutors or help centers.
And I will say, as a first year student, I was so shy. I was in one of my English classes, I was the very last person to meet with the professor during their office hours. And what really actually helped me later on was becoming a tutor and becoming a TA. Because then when I saw that people asked me questions and that they came to my office hours, what I'd always been afraid of as a student was like, if I ask for help, you're going to think I'm dumb, that I don't know anything. And actually, being on the other side of it, when people ask questions and ask for help, that made me see, oh, you're a really engaged learner. You are really invested in taking control of your learning, and that makes me want to help you.
Mm.
So if that's helpful to think of it in that way instead, that's going to really impress the person that you're asking for help. The fact that you're reaching out to them
Yeah, so we're very conscious of time. We know we've gone way
oh my God.
beyond our time, but if you do have questions, please pop them in the chat.
Yeah,
Um,
and Chianza, would you mind sharing those PDFs on
sure.
how
Yeah.
to book an appointment with a tutor? Because we have much more detailed instructions as well.
Okay, I'm gonna try to add this. Yeah,
Yeah.
that I don't know if that will actually. I don't think it will let me attach.
Oh, it won't let you
Yeah.
share the
No, no,
as
it
a
won't let me
PDF.
do that. But what we can do
Yeah.
is, since you registered for this workshop, we have your email addresses. What we can do is send you a follow-up email with the two PDFs. So one of them is how to book. Um, Actually, how about this? What if I share my screen? No, actually, that won't really help right now because it's a
Yeah.
whole PDF of
We'll
information.
send,
We'll
yeah,
send
we'll send it, and
it.
maybe we'll just send it to everyone who's
Yeah.
like attended today, so you'll get those more detailed instructions
Hmm.
on how you can book appointments. And then if you have any difficulty with that, you can always email the Academic Learning Center as well. Their contact info is on their website if you just look up Academic
Yeah.
Learning Center. Yeah. I just want to take 1 minute to get tips for getting back into work after taking a break. Again, like just set yourself even a really short timer for when you're coming back. Like if it's hard to get started on something, just say, okay, can I work on this for 5 minutes? If after and then see after that 5 minutes is up, okay, can I extend this now to 10 minutes to 15 minutes until you get back into that flow again? That's sort of and that's the strategy that I use as well. I also try to pay attention to do I need to like take a walk? Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Do I need to attend to those things first? Because sometimes that's just actually what your body needs instead of studying at that moment. But timers, really short timers, are what saved me. Mm.
Yeah, this is a good question. Would you suggest any other tips other than meeting with your tutor or professor for Chem 1300? I feel I need much practice. Yes. So we also have study skills tutors and content tutors. When you log into the platform that Gretchen just showed us here. So it's going to be the same sort of thing where there'll be a content tutor who will help you study specifically for Chemistry 1300. Gretchen, is the drop-down menu there where you can show us
Yeah,
the list?
the Chem
Yeah.
1300
So if
tutors.
you, yeah, so if
So,
you look right over there, she's clicked content tutors and she's also selected Chem 1300. So that she's able to see just the sessions for Chem 1300 or at least the tutors that are available for Chem 1300. So I would definitely recommend that as another resource to help you with a specific course. If you
I
have
would
other
say
questions,
too, oh,
sorry, go
for
ahead.
chem, there is also
Yes.
supplemental instruction, which probably has been mentioned. Oh yeah, so
Yeah.
okay, thank you for the person who's already mentioned the SI sessions there,
Mm-hmm.
that they're really meant to be well integrated with the course. There are tons of like online chemistry videos, like just on YouTube, which I think are very helpful if you just need to refresh on specific things. But that is really an area where it's a lot of problem solving in a really short amount of time. So that's where practice testing and practicing textbook problems are going to be really, really helpful strategies. And small tip, do the problem first and then check the answer after. Don't check the answer before you start solving.
Yeah.
That's it's not as helpful as you think. We've gone really over time, so
Yeah.
thanks for your patience, everyone who's stayed. We'll not take it, hard if you had to leave before this, but if you have more questions as well that you didn't get to ask today, I'll just put the FY Center First Year Center email into the chat as well. If you have a question that's specifically about this workshop, just say, "Oh, I was in the preparing for midterms workshop. Can you ask like Chance or Gretchen this?" And then our wonderful admin staff will make sure that we get your email and address that.
Mm-hmm. And you can also use that email just to book an appointment with an advisor, right?
Yeah.
We mentioned before we are a resource for you guys. If you have any questions, we like to think that we know a little bit about everything. So so please do email us, and we can try to help you as best as we can. So I think that's it from
Yeah,
us.
I
You
think
guys
I'll
have a lovely evening, or you might be someplace else in the world.
it might be
Have a
morning or
good
afternoon for
morning,
you.
good afternoon. So thank you so much for joining us today. These sessions are going to be, as we mentioned, recorded. So you'll be able to find them online as well on the Academic Learning Center website. And we will follow up with an email with the two resources we discussed, which is how to book an appointment with a tutor, and then study skills tutors as well, just booking appointments with them. So thank you all so much.
Yes, thank you. And good studying. Like happy studying. I hope your midterms go well.
Best
Like
wishes.
even if you feel very alone, like we are cheering for you. We
Mhm.
want you to do well and stay sane and all of that good stuff like while you're studying too.
Yes, we're sending positive vibes, nothing but
Positive energy.
all right. Take care, you guys.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.